is a tunnel, and machinery inside that tunnel sends beams of energy in a vast circle.
Particle accelerator altered the weight of one electron and therefore destroyed our universe and shifted us into the universe that's directly next to it, and therefore things are different in this universe.
Joe Rogan, who's known for digging into the strangest and most unbelievable conversations, couldn't even hide his shock when this young genius dropped the bombshell. The world's smartest kid reveals CERN actually opened a portal.
There are other universes, they're next to ours, and this actually relates to my theory of the Mandela effect and how the particle accelerator altered the weight of one.
The more this kid talked, the more it felt less like speculation and more like he was unveiling a puzzle piece the world wasn't ready to see yet.
The Large Hadron Collider is one of the wonders of the modern world. It's believed to be the largest and most complex machine mankind has ever created.
And Joe, you could literally see him processing it in real time. Are you curious already? Grab your seat, because this is one of those internet-shaking moments you'll be talking about long after the video ends. Joe Rogan reacts as world's smartest kid reveals CERN opened a portal. The now infamous episode of the Joe Rogan Experience began in the same relaxed way most of Rogan's podcasts did. He sat in his familiar studio, leaning back in his chair, prepared for what he thought would be another curious but fairly ordinary interview. What made this particular recording different, however, was the guest sitting across from him. He was not a seasoned scientist, not a politician, and not even an author with a new book to promote. Instead, the seat was taken by Max Laughlin, a 13-year-old often described as the world's smartest kid. Nobody in that room, and certainly not Rogan himself, could have predicted the way the next 3 hours would unfold. How could anyone have expected a child to casually begin explaining theories about CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, and its supposed hidden discoveries? And how could they have known that within an hour, the host himself would be left in stunned silence? In this video, we'll find out the truth from the beginning till the very end. So stay glued till the end, because the full story is about to be unveiled. The turning point arrived about 45 minutes into their discussion. Up until then, it had been the usual flow: Rogan asking questions, Max answering with calm intelligence, and the atmosphere carrying that easy rhythm his listeners knew so well. But then, almost without warning, the mood in the studio shifted. Listeners could almost feel the air get heavier as Max brought up something that caught Rogan completely off guard. He spoke of the portal. Rogan, a man famous for keeping his composure in the face of bold claims from politicians, scientists, and conspiracy theorists alike, suddenly lost his poker face. His eyes widened, he leaned forward, and his hand went instinctively to his headphones. For the first time in recent memory, the seasoned host appeared utterly speechless. Was this really happening? Could a 13-year-old possibly be suggesting that CERN had opened a passage to another dimension? Breaking his silence, Rogan interrupted with disbelief that sounded almost nervous. Wait, he said, pulling his headphones off as if he needed clarity without any interference. Are you saying CERN has actually opened something? Like, confirmed this? His words carried that rare tone of curiosity mixed with a dash of alarm. Max, however, did not flinch. With the calmness of someone far older than his years, he nodded and explained that while CERN would never publicly acknowledge such a thing, the evidence was in the data patterns. He spoke of what physicists referred to as energy leakage, a term that, in his view, hinted at nothing less than a temporary connection between our dimension and another. Max explained that the official reports avoided the word portal. Instead, CERN described it as unexplained energy displacement. But, he added, when one looked closely at the last 3 major collisions and analyzed the patterns, the suggestion became clear. Rogan's face at that moment told the whole story. His bewildered expression, captured in real time, became an instant meme. Within hours of the episode being uploaded, that frozen look of disbelief had spread across Reddit, Twitter, and TikTok. Millions laughed at the reaction, but just as many leaned in with a strange mix of awe and unease. Was this just the imagination of a bright kid, or was he actually onto something? What stood out during the conversation wasn't just the claim itself, but the way Max broke it down live on air. Unlike so many guests who stumble when Rogan pushes for details, Max showed extraordinary clarity. He leaned on simple analogies, carefully building bridges between mind-bending physics and everyday understanding. At one point, he picked up a notepad Rogan provided and sketched as he spoke. "Think of our universe as a sheet of paper," he explained. "When CERN creates these extreme energy densities, they're essentially folding the paper, creating a crease that lets 2 points touch that normally wouldn't. Could there be a simpler way to describe something as complex as dimensional physics?" It was this ability to translate the unthinkable into something his audience could picture that impressed people most. Viewers were quick to note the structure in his explanation. He moved seamlessly through topics like quantum field disruptions, their measurable effects, the mysterious role of dark matter at dimensional boundaries, and why certain collision patterns seem to suggest leakage between realities. And he didn't just speculate. He referenced specific CERN experiments, pointed out data anomalies, and even mentioned theoretical models in a way that suggested he had spent hours combing through research many adults could barely follow. Rogan, a man known for drilling into details, found himself unusually quiet. He admitted on air, "I've interviewed Nobel Prize winners who couldn't explain this stuff so clearly." When the episode dropped, the internet erupted almost overnight. Within 24 hours, clips of Max's explanation about the so-called portal had racked up more than 15 million views across different platforms. Reactions quickly split into groups, each with their own take. Physics enthusiasts debated endlessly in Reddit threads, arguing over the accuracy of Max's interpretations. Some applauded his sharp mind and creative theories, while others highlighted gaps in the science. But even among the critics, one thing was clear. His ability to articulate complex ideas at such a young age demanded respect. On the other side, conspiracy communities embraced the interview with open arms. To them, Max's words were not just the musings of a gifted teenager, they were proof of everything they had long suspected about CERN's true purpose. Thousands of reaction videos appeared, with creators dissecting and expanding on his claims. Meanwhile, mainstream science communicators found themselves flooded with questions from curious followers. Suddenly, they had to release videos and articles explaining the difference between theory and confirmed scientific discovery. Was it frustrating for them? Perhaps. But it was also a reminder of how powerful one viral moment could be in shaping public imagination. Even CERN itself couldn't ignore the wave of attention. Surprisingly, several of its scientists engaged on Twitter. They didn't mock or dismiss Max outright. Instead, they struck a softer tone, praising his passion while clarifying that his interpretations leapt far ahead of what their data actually showed. One senior physicist tweeted something that resonated with many. "Always thrilling to see young minds excited about particle physics, even if their interpretations sometimes leap ahead of our actual findings." Could there have been a more diplomatic way to put it? Still, no part of the episode resonated more than the moment Rogan asked, "So we could be living in a world that's already inside a portal?" That single line became the defining soundbite, replayed endlessly in memes, reaction videos, and even printed on t-shirts and mugs. It was as if the stunned look on Rogan's face had captured the exact feeling the audience experienced, an uneasy mix of wonder, curiosity, and disbelief. And so, what began as just another podcast recording quickly transformed into a cultural moment. And if you think that sounds dramatic, just wait, because the story doesn't pause here. Which brings us straight into the heart of what is inside CERN and what's really going on underground. And trust me, you're going to want to stay with me till the very end, because what's coming will shake every assumption you've ever had. Inside CERN and what's really going on underground. Beneath the Franco-Swiss border, not far from the city of Geneva, lies something that many people have called humanity's boldest scientific project. It is the Large Hadron Collider, or the LHC as scientists usually shorten it. One could picture it as an enormous underground ring stretching a staggering 27 kilometers around. a hidden tunnel that serves as a laboratory of almost unimaginable scale. Now, while some people have thrown wild ideas around about portals and mysterious doorways to other dimensions, especially in sensational podcasts like the one Joe Rogan once hosted, the actual purpose of this machine is far more grounded and, in truth, even more awe-inspiring. After all, isn't it fascinating how the real story often turns out to be more impressive than the myths people create about it? The collider itself is a masterpiece of modern engineering. It is not just a simple tunnel, but a carefully designed structure packed with superconducting magnets and special accelerating systems that give particles incredible bursts of energy. These magnets, as scientists have explained, must be kept at a temperature of 271.3 degrees Celsius. That is colder than outer space itself, and the only way to maintain such conditions is by using liquid helium cooling systems. Inside this frozen loop, two beams of particles travel in opposite directions, moving at speeds so close to that of light that one can hardly wrap the mind around it. Doesn't it make one wonder how humans even manage to design such a thing? What makes the LHC truly stand apart is its astonishing precision. Those beams do not simply circle lazily. They race around the ring more than 11,000 times every single second. They are kept in line inside vacuum tubes by the magnets, and then, at 4 carefully chosen points in the tunnel, they are deliberately crossed to smash into each other. And when they collide, it isn't just a small bang. At times, there can be as many as 600 million collisions happening every second. One cannot help but pause and ask, what on earth are scientists hoping to find by smashing these tiny particles together? The purpose, as researchers have always been clear to point out, is not to open portals or unleash anything dangerous. The real aim is to look deeper into the structure of our universe. By recreating the conditions that existed just fractions of a second after the Big Bang, they can observe how particles behave when exposed to extreme energy and density. It is almost like turning back the cosmic clock and peeking into the moment when everything we know first began. Isn't that a thought worth pausing on? That scientists are, in a way, trying to recreate the very birth of the universe? When protons crash into each other inside the LHC, they do not simply bounce apart like billiard balls. Instead, their massive energy is converted into mass, giving birth to new particles in line with Einstein's famous formula, E=mc². These collisions also generate temperatures so hot that they make the center of the sun seem cool by comparison, more than 100,000 times hotter, to be exact. In those brief flashes, a strange and ancient state of matter appears, a kind of particle soup made up of quarks and gluons. This soup is believed to be the very stuff out of which everything in our universe eventually formed. How could anyone not be curious about such a discovery? Of course, with such powerful collisions, many ordinary people worry about safety. But scientists have explained again and again that these experiments pose no danger to the planet. In fact, much higher energy collisions happen naturally in the atmosphere all the time when cosmic rays from outer space strike the Earth. It has been happening for billions of years, and the Earth is still here. Doesn't that put the fear into perspective? To capture and study the results of these collisions, the LHC is fitted with 4 massive detectors, each one like a giant, high-tech camera designed to look at a particular aspect of the collisions. Atlas and CMS are the most well-known. They were the ones that eventually confirmed the existence of the Higgs boson back in 2012, a discovery that made headlines worldwide. Then there is ALICE, which focuses on studying the quark-gluon plasma, that strange soup from the early universe. Finally, there is LHCb, which studies the subtle differences between matter and antimatter, a mystery that might one day explain why the universe is made of something rather than nothing. Now, while some outside observers like to say that the scientists are trying to create portals, the truth is far less dramatic but far more meaningful. The detectors are really searching for patterns, for small clues that might suggest something beyond what we currently know. Even the search for extra dimensions is not about doors, or gateways. Instead, it is about measuring how particles behave, whether they leave behind traces that suggest influences from dimensions beyond the three that people live in. If such hints are found, it will not mean a fantasy like portal opening up in Geneva, but rather that our understanding of reality has just become richer and deeper. At its heart, what is happening at CERN is not magic or mystery, but science in its purest form. And that is where this next part becomes really fascinating. Because behind the viral headlines, there's a truth that has been buried. And if you stay with me right till the very end of this journey, you'll not only discover where these portal stories came from, but also why they've held on to people's minds for so long. The truth behind the portal story. Behind every wild CERN conspiracy, there always seemed to be a mix of misunderstanding, exaggeration, and a heavy dose of internet storytelling. The European Organization for Nuclear Research, better known as CERN, was built to push the boundaries of science, yet it somehow became a favorite target for the strangest claims people could imagine. Many wondered, how did a research center focused on particle physics end up being painted as a secret portal opening machine? The truth, of course, was far less dramatic but no less fascinating. CERN's work was about studying the tiniest building blocks of the universe, but because of the complex language scientists used, the public sometimes twisted their words into myths that spread like wildfire online. The birth of many of these conspiracies could actually be traced back to a single moment that spiraled out of control. In 2016, a video suddenly appeared online, showing people dressed in black cloaks performing what looked like a ritual sacrifice, right in front of CERN's statue of Shiva. The footage was creepy, mysterious, and staged so convincingly that it felt like something out of a horror movie. But was it real? Not at all. CERN quickly confirmed that it was a prank filmed without permission by people who had access to the grounds. They said it was a spoof, but by then, the video had already gone viral. And ironically, what was meant as a joke to mock conspiracy theorists ended up feeding the very rumors it was trying to ridicule. Doesn't it seem strange how sometimes a joke ends up making things worse instead of better? Years later, the same pattern repeated itself. In July 2022, CERN restarted the Large Hadron Collider after 3 years of upgrades and maintenance. For scientists, this was an exciting milestone, but for conspiracy theorists, it was fuel for their wildest imaginations. Social media posts began circulating with bold claims like, CERN will be opening a portal on July 5th. Some even linked it to a planetary alignment that had happened a few weeks earlier. With just a few tweets and videos, people were convinced something otherworldly was about to unfold. Was there any evidence behind these claims? Absolutely not. But on platforms like Twitter and TikTok, facts mattered less than how quickly a post could go viral. The role of conspiracy blogs, YouTube channels, and TikTok creators in amplifying these stories couldn't be ignored. Accounts with names like CERN-opining Parallel Diamond drew in millions of views by claiming the collider was powerful enough to change the weather or open gateways to mirror dimensions. And when physicists used terms like extra dimensions or portals, they were talking about highly specific theories in physics, not magical gateways to other universes. Yet, to someone unfamiliar with scientific jargon, those words sounded like proof of hidden experiments. One physicist even admitted that the language of science could sometimes be misleading to outsiders, which made it easy for people to take terms out of context and run with them. It raised an important question. Was the problem really the science itself, or the way it was being explained to the public? In reality, CERN's research had nothing to do with portals or wormholes. Its work was far more grounded and incredibly important for understanding how the universe actually functioned. In 2012, CERN made global headlines for discovering the Higgs boson particle, a breakthrough that explained how particles gained mass. Since then, their focus had shifted to mysteries like dark matter, which scientists believed made up most of the universe but had yet to be directly observed. These were questions that could reshape humanity's understanding of existence, but they weren't as flashy or thrilling as the idea of ripping open a doorway to another world. So why did people prefer to believe the wilder version of the story instead of the truth? And here was the part that really put things in perspective. The collisions happening at CERN, as powerful as they were, actually occurred naturally in Earth's atmosphere all the time when cosmic rays hit the planet. If the universe itself hadn't collapsed from those natural collisions, why would anyone think the collider posed a risk of tearing reality apart? At the end of the day, CERN wasn't in the business of unleashing chaos. It was in the business of unlocking knowledge. Each experiment was another step toward answering questions that had puzzled humanity for centuries. Instead of summoning portals or shaking the foundations of reality, CERN scientists were methodically studying the unseen forces that shaped the cosmos. Could portals exist? People often said that while viral clips from the Rogan podcast made it look as though CERN was secretly opening doorways to other worlds, the truth was far more layered than that. The scientific ideas behind those claims, they explained, actually came from real physics. And though the theories sounded almost unbelievable at times, they deserved a closer look. After all, wasn't it always human curiosity that pushed people to ask whether reality might be bigger than what the eyes could see? They reminded others that theoretical physics had been toying with these questions for decades. Einstein's general theory of relativity, for example, had already shown that space itself wasn't rigid. It could bend, it could stretch, and it could shrink. And if that were true, then why couldn't there be hidden layers to reality tucked away from plain sight? To make the idea easier, they compared it to someone walking on a tightrope. That person would only move forward or backward because that's all they thought was possible. But an ant crawling on the same rope could move not just forward and backward, but also around the rope itself. To the tightrope walker, the ant's movement might feel like some strange invisible trick. In truth, it was just another dimension at play, hidden to one being, yet perfectly natural to another. And that raised the question, what if humans were the tightrope walkers, blind to the extra paths around them? They also pointed out something many people found curious: gravity. Why, they asked, did gravity feel so much weaker than other forces? A tiny fridge magnet could pick up a paperclip with ease, even though the entire Earth was pulling on that same paperclip. Didn't that seem odd? Some physicists thought gravity's weakness might be a clue, that perhaps it was leaking into extra dimensions, spreading itself thin, while forces like electromagnetism stayed confined to the familiar world. And then there was string theory, often described as one of the boldest scientific attempts to tie everything together. The theory said that what people called particles weren't really tiny dots at all. Instead, they were unimaginably small vibrating strings. The way those strings vibrated decided what kind of particle they would be, whether light, electron, or something else. But here was the astonishing part. For string theory to even work mathematically, reality would need more dimensions, 10 or 11 in total, not just the 3 of space and 1 of time that people knew. The catch? These extra dimensions were thought to be curled up so tightly, smaller than an atom, that people couldn't see or touch them. Didn't it make one wonder how much of the universe existed beyond human senses? That was why CERN fascinated so many. People thought scientists there were actively building portals, but in reality their work was much more subtle. What they looked for was something called missing energy. When particles smashed together inside the collider, detectors recorded the balance of energy that came out. If suddenly some of that energy went missing, it might mean a particle had slipped away into a hidden dimension, or perhaps hinted at dark matter, another great mystery. It wasn't about opening a doorway one could step through, but about catching whispers of realities that might lie beyond. Still, they admitted, the experiments had limits. Physics experts had explained that to make something like a stable black hole or a wormhole a sci-fi dream for many, one would need an accelerator as large as the entire universe itself. Even the most advanced machines humanity had built, like the LHC, couldn't do that. And if a micro black hole somehow appeared inside a collision, it wouldn't last long at all. It would vanish almost instantly, within 10 to the 27th seconds. That was less than a blink of an eye, far too short for any kind of interdimensional journey. People left the conversation realizing that while the podcast clips had fueled imaginations with wild talk of portals and alternate worlds, the real science was equally thrilling, if not more so. It wasn't about sensational shortcuts, but about patient searching, careful reasoning, and the human hunger to know whether the universe was far stranger and larger than anyone had ever dared to believe. And wasn't that, in the end, the most exciting possibility of all? And speaking of questions, one name that always sparks them is Max Laughlin. He's the kid genius who's not afraid to push boundaries, and his views on reality itself will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. So don't even think about clicking away now, because what Max believes about reality might just be the most mind-bending part of this entire story. And you'll want to be here when it all unfolds. What Max Laughlin believes about reality. At the center of Max Laughlin's way of seeing the world was something far deeper than what most people his age would ever think about. People often described him as a teenage prodigy who did not just ask the usual questions, but tried to turn the very idea of existence on its head. His theories, though radical, seemed to flow from him in such a natural way that one could not help but wonder, how could someone so young be bold enough to challenge the things scientists and philosophers had debated for centuries? At the core of his thinking was the belief that what people accepted as reality might not be the true story at all, and he spoke about it with such ease that listeners were often left both intrigued and unsettled. Max often pointed to the multiverse as more than just a passing idea. While scientists had long entertained the possibility that multiple universes could exist side by side, Max spoke about it as though humanity was already living in the proof of it. He suggested that when CERN began experimenting at a scale no one had ever dared before, something extraordinary happened, something so massive that it might have actually torn through the very fabric of reality. He described it as if humanity had been pushed, without even knowing it, into a parallel world that mirrored the old one almost perfectly. But then again, he would ask if everything looked the same. How would anyone know if they had slipped into another version of existence? Was it possible that the universe people thought was theirs was just an alternate extension of the one they originally belonged to? When Max spoke about this, he often blended scientific principles with everyday observations, making people rethink things they had brushed off as coincidences or tricks of memory. He leaned heavily on the idea of quantum observation, the puzzling truth that observing reality actually changes it. In his view, that explained why people remembered things so differently, because everyone, in a way, was shaping reality with their own perception. We all remember things differently because we perceive things differently, he would often explain. That idea, though simple in words, carried a strange weight. Was it possible, he implied, that memory was not a reliable record of the past, but a shifting reflection of the observer? He also tied his worldview to the mystery of dark matter, that invisible presence in the universe that could not be seen, but revealed itself through gravitational pull. For most scientists, dark matter was already an enigma, a puzzle with missing pieces. But for Max, it was more than just a question of physics. It was a clue, a hint that something bigger was hidden beyond human reach. He suggested that CERN's very attempt to uncover the truth of dark matter may have opened doors people never intended to open. And if dark matter truly served as a bridge between realities, could it be that these experiments had not just observed but triggered connections that altered everything? Perhaps the most daring of Max's claims was his belief that humanity was already inside one of these portals. He argued that CERN's experiments did not merely change how people studied the universe, but may have destroyed the original one entirely. According to him, the world people now lived in was not the one they were born into, but rather the closest copy of it that lay beside it. His evidence? The Mandela effect. Those strange collective false memories shared by millions of people worldwide. How was it, he asked, that entire groups of people remembered the same thing in the same wrong way? To Max, the answer was clear. These were not mistakes of memory at all, but fragments of the original universe leaking through into this one. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.